The Panasonic GX80 is without a doubt a little gem. It packs a whole lot of video features in a very small package with a very low price tag. I already did a bunch of videos on the GX80, and if you haven't seen them, you should check them out. One of its biggest strengths of this camera is its small form factor, but I think that the image quality is simply great. Even though it's only 4:0 in 8-bit, the image quality is quite nice, and I think it works very well even for short form content or no budget feature films or even documentary work. So the images coming from this camera are great, but to make it work in an environment where you want to shoot long form content or in a scenario where you work with more people and have to work fast and more professional, you need a rig for this camera, which is why I did that. And here it is. I wanted to have a cageless setup because it's really hard to get a cage right now for the GX80, and I only wanted to use standard parts to keep the cost of the whole rig low, which is, in my opinion, the philosophy of this camera. As a base, I used the Smallrig Base with its rails, and I used an Arca Swiss blade underneath the camera. The Arca Swiss blade is necessary to be able to run out the cables from the dummy battery back to the Smallrig NPF battery adapter. This one NPF battery powers the camera and the monitor on top. I know the cable management is not perfect, shorter cables would be better, but that was just what I had lying around, and the access cable are simply stored underneath the camera display. In front of the camera I have the universal Smallrig handle with a NATO rail adapter, a rail adapter itself. So it's a little bit of a funky solution, but it works because those were the parts I had lying around. And this handle is really important because it makes it able for you to hold the whole rig, and you also make sure that the HDMI cable is never unprotected when you lay the camera down. When it falls to the side, the handle will protect that. Also, you are not able to hold the camera on its side grip because of the cable sticking out. So this handle for me is crucial. On top of the camera I use the UURig cold shoe handle. Normally I would never use a cold shoe handle because I had so many cold shoe adapted items slipping off, and I also already had a cold shoe handle that slipped off the camera all the time, which I found was very dangerous. But in this case, the UURig top handle is really great. It is very stable and it never slipped off so far, and it also feels like a secure connection. Normally I also wouldn't trust the cold shoe mounted handle because I don't trust the cold shoe to hold that much weight, but since the whole rig is not that heavy and I wouldn't carry the camera on the top handle all the time, I think it works in this case. Since I don't have any batteries on top of the monitor, there is no weight that presses down onto the cold shoe. So this whole setup on top of the camera is very, very light, and I would trust it in this case. On top of the handle we have another NATO rail, and on top of that a Smallrig NATO rail adapted monitor mount. I really like that monitor mount. It makes everything feel like a RED camera since you can tilt it like that. And if you want to go cheaper, you can use a ball head, for example, or a mini magic arm. On the monitor mount I have the Andycine 4K monitor. It's a budget monitor, but it works really, really great. It has full HD resolution, so it's just a great monitor to work with. Being able to see everything much bigger is great for being able to pull focus or to being able to show other people what you've shot. On the small screen down there, it's not really possible. It works if you are alone, but if you want to use this camera in a bigger production and just want to look more professional, a monitor on top really helps you with that. Many of the ideas and recommendations are from Caleb Pike, video DSLR shooter, and you should check out his reviews on the Andycine 4K monitor, for example, to see if this is a monitor for you. There is quite some HDMI lag, but if you know about the lag, you can work around that. The whole rig weighs around 2.5 kilograms, which in my opinion isn't too heavy, and all the weight comes from the metal parts and the NPF battery, of course. But having the battery on the back for me is much better than having it on the monitor or inside the camera, because it balances the whole rig out. If I hold it like this and I have the weight on the back and distributed on this axis, I can hold it very comfortably. It's not top heavy at all, it doesn't press down, so I can use it for a very long time. If I had the battery on top of the camera monitor, I already said it, there is very much strain on the Kojo mount. I wouldn't do that at all. And I can work with that very comfortably for a longer time. Also, having a rig that has the weight distributed on this axis and not on this axis doesn't give you that much strain on your wrist. Having a top heavy rig, in my experience, causes a lot of stress on your wrist and your fingers, and having it on this axis makes it much more comfortable to work with. Also, the one battery solution is really great if you want to work for the whole day without having to think about switching the battery all the time. So it just makes your rig bigger, more stable, and looks far more professional. One problem, if not the biggest problem of this camera, is the lack of an audio input. This doesn't really make it usable for a lot of scenarios, but you can always record your audio externally and sync it up in post later, which is what I did on my last feature film. But if you want to get unnecessarily expensive and have the audio right in your video file, I have a combination that works with that setup. And this is using a Ninja 5 or a similar recorder and a microphone. You can use the side handle as your microphone mount and put the Ninja 5 on top. You feed it into your recorder and voila, you have your audio inside your video file. This is really expensive, but it works with this setup quite nicely. But you can also get a cheaper monitor that has an audio input and you can record it that way. And if you want a perfect control over your shutter when you are outside, you can use my variable ND filter system that I made out of a KF concept filter holder. You should check out the video on that. I think it's a neat system and I can certainly recommend it since I use it now for a lot of shoots and I'm quite happy with it. At the moment it's really hard to shoot anything, but I hope I can take this rig out for a spin and shoot a little project with it. And when I do that, I will certainly do another follow-up video and sharing my experiences or doing a little update if there was anything that I wasn't too happy with. So if you want to see that, please subscribe to this channel and like this video. If you have any questions about the parts and things I used on this setup, please feel free to ask in the comments down below. And I hope you have a nice day and create something extraordinary.